The clock started with someone else's gun. Admiral Mara Cade stood beneath the slanted canopy of the command blister, as if braced against weather that existed only in the numbers. Her fleet hung inside the burned ellipse of the Faid Morrow Gate, a ragged arc of destroyers and hospital freighters and ore tugs pressed into escort duty. The ultimatum ticked in the corner of every screen, 00, 1700. Prefect Rill of the Concorde. Ultimacy had broadcast the timer with his demands, and the demands were simple enough to insult arithmetic. Surrender the convoy's refugee carriers' power-down drives, transmit surrender protocols, and live. Decline and die before the minute hand fell. We will teach them what mercy looks under fire. The blister's glass returned a dim ghost of Mara's face, the reflection cut by lines of data that ran like rain. Beneath her boots, she felt the low, constant vibration of the flagship Valiant's superstructure as radiators cycled and pumps pushed coolant through seams that had never been intended for so many quick starts. Air carried the sour bite of ionized dust from the last emergency burn. Where she asked, "Does he keep his tooth we cannot see?" Prefect Rill operates a severance array along the inner reach of the blockade. Parabola said cadenza, the fleet mind, its voice warm with the practice of being a good teacher in hard hours. Range estimated at 3 million clicks. Spectrum sweep indicates a spectral gap consistent with coherent shear at subluminal fractions. Commander Ren Ito, her executive officer, pinched 2 fingers and made the blockade render swell like a bruise. Severance array fits the Ultimacy's doctrine. They love simple choices. They love the illusion of them, Mara said. A hiss bled from the deck as an auxiliary exchanger vented heat. It smelled like hot metal and citrus cleaning solvent. Out at the gate's mouth, convoy ships drifted closer to the pale geometric throat, waiting for the corridor, the ultimatum denied. The timer read 00:16:12. The sensors returned the precise heartbeat of 100,000 souls. The mirror lattice will show them their own threat, Lieutenant Holm Mara said. Inventory. Decoys 79, Holm replied, hands steady over a console the color of distant thunder. Disposable sails, 21. Panel reflectors, 63. Drone tenders, 6. We've got 3 pallets of chaff spindles each with programmable indexers. Heat is our hard limit. Chief Kemi Duong, the EW lead, flicked a query bead that made the air taste like dust again. Spectrum is noisy, she said. They're saturating with doctrinal bark. I can still tuck our whispers where their doctrine won't listen. Mara watched the blockade's crescent. The Ultimacy ships wore black plates engraved with the geometry of past ultimatums. Their engines pulsed in strict rhythm, as if metronome and gun shared a single heart. Get me the prefect. A square opened in the air. Rill's face had the pale composure of a notary. The angle of his mouth was a ledger line. Admiral Cade, he said, you have 16 minutes to choose life. Your severance array is a shepherd's knife dressed as law, Mara said. You will not cut these civilians. Your moral tone is noted, Rill replied. Transmit surrender protocols or I will prune your indecision. The feed closed like a door. The hull throbbed as maneuvering jets ticked the flagship a fraction off center, aligning for a possible sprint that would cook everything soft. The timer slid to 00:15:19. The ledger is open, and every cost will be entered. She turned to the blister's low rail fingers curling around composite worn smooth by other hands. We start with the convoy, she said, and with a story they need to live through. Before the set piece, the Valiant's mess deck held a hush that felt like reverence. A cook tilted soup over a sailor's tin and said nothing, because talking made you feel the quake in your chest. A nurse threaded gauze through fingers that would soon be lifting stretchers, then paused to look at her own knuckles, as if memorizing their unbloodied form. 2 deckhands played a slow hand of cards with a third who didn't know the rules. The third laughed too quickly when he won. On a refugee carrier, a teacher drew a gate on a bulkhead for children who had only known rings of steel and light, and she explained the math of hope with chalk and small hands. A mechanic cut his thumb on a radiator fin and watched the single bead well, then wiped it on his pants and said, "It's nothing to nobody." In a quiet alcove, a pilot called her father, and the delay to his reply was the longest thing she'd ever felt. A string of prayer beads clicked against a mouth that had run out of words, and then the ship's announcements rolled through like soft thunder, and everyone pretended the sound was ordinary weather. "Chaff grid in a diamond," Mara said, as she returned to the blister voice, careful and clear. Mirror lattice behind the chaff angles tuned to return their own targeting packets with a half-beat phase lag. Cadenza write the pattern with Chemi. "Ren, when we move like folk who believe we'll still have dinner." "Understood," Ren said. The Valiant's cooling fans spooled up. The scent of ozone tapped the back of Mara's throat. On the tactical pane, decoys formed a neat geometry that looked like restraint. Each disposable sail flared as it took a thread of light and widened it into a convincing lie. A field of glittering dust bloomed like frost. "Countdown isn't a collar. It's a choice we can hold. Convoy." "This is Valiant Actual," Mara said on the broadband. "You will see a corridor open where none exists. Trust the geometry. When you move, you do not stop, even if we look like we are dying for you." A dozen captains answered in tight voices. "Copy, Valiant. Copy, Admiral. Copy, ma'am." Cadenza, Mara said, feeling the pressure suit whisper across her shoulders as she straightened. "Go. Mimi the Severance array's teeth when they make their first bite. I will paint each tooth," Cadenza said, "and number them as if they were days." Her mouth twitched. "Save poetry for later." "Poetry makes the numbers stick," Cadenza replied. Heat bled into the air as radiators extended like dark wings. Coolant chimed through the lines. A low-frequency shiver ran the length of the deck and through the bones of every person aboard. Out through the transparency, the ice of the gate shone like a promise with edges. "Ultimacy batteries are shifting," Holmes said. "They're waiting for us to declare a vector. They want clean accounting." Mara's throat worked as she swallowed. "Let's give them a mess we can read. The open corridor will turn on them like a door." The decoys rushed forward on whisper drives. Sensors counted them as lives because they had been taught to count motion as a pulse. The mirror lattice lifted behind reflective panels, catching the Ultimacy's ranging sweeps and sending them back with their wrists bent. The first cut from the Severance array reached. It was invisible until it was not. Space rippled. One disposable sail died with a sigh of heat, and the lattice answered by turning the array's second cut back across the blockade's own screening fire. "Array Tooth 2 compromised their corvette screen," Cadenza said. "Minimal but public." Chief Duong exhaled. "I can make it less minimal." "Do it!" The next shear scythed through the lattice in a place designed to look like accident. It glanced off a mirrored plate angled to behave like indifference, and the beam's edge brushed an Ultimacy picket's radiators. The picket's thermal bloom leaped. All the blockade's guns spoke at once, their soundless mouths visible only in how the stars red-shifted around them. "Convoy marked green," Mara said, hand flat with the rail. "Now." The convoy moved. Tugboats and freighters and ambulances in the shape of ships gathered momentum with a dignity no doctrine could grant or strip away. Their drives came up as if breath had been withheld and released. The corridor showed its lie like a gentleman reveals a card fixed to his sleeve. The Ultimacy's sensors drank the reflections and believed. The lattice turns threats into mirrors and mirrors into roads. An Ultimacy cruiser hurled a packet that looked like permission and was a trap. Cadenza caught it on a ghost channel and held it where it could do no harm. Holm called ranges and angles voiced like a metronome. Vector 37 Mark II. Picket shed at 9. Array warming again. Renmara said, "Prep soft kill pods on my mark. If they hardlock the corridor, we turn the lock." He nodded, lips pale. We'll make a different key. Thunder that was not thunder ran through the ship as ejectors spat pods into empty space. The scent of hot plastic folded into the air's geometry. Sweat cooled at Mara's collar, and the chill prickled her scalp. We have a civilian tug lagging, Duong said. She's heavy with cryopods. Her captain is good, but gravity is rude. Mara keyed a direct line. Tug Rafferty, you're drifting to a place where choices get taken. Steady. A woman replied, voice frayed. I see the lie, Admiral. It looks like a road and a wound. It's a bandage if you move now, Mara said. Trust the timing. Copy, the woman breathed. The line will hold because people decide to be still. Rill came back without being invited. Admiral, you are expending lives to make a point. I am counting lives you would miscount, Mara said. You do not have the numbers to win. I have enough to live with. He blinked. The feed cut again. The severance array scythed in earnest. It carved an ellipse that reached for the convoy's rear like a hand that had forgotten its job. The mirror lattice twisted, and the beam met itself, coming back with a yaw that made the array's mounts ring. An Ultimacy frigate stumbled in its lane and clipped another, and the part of Mara that did not enjoy harm to anyone still took the data and filed it as use. Heat margin is closing, Wren said. We are eating our own breath. Coolant reserve, 20%. Spend 10. Spent. The account only balances if we pay for it ourselves. Kemi's hands blurred. They're injecting a palisade in our corridor, she said. If we continue straight, we thread a needle with teeth. Side channel, Mara asked. I can build one like a smuggler picking a pocket. Build it, Mara said. Convoy adjust 2 degrees starboard on my mark. Mark. The convoy shifted the move small enough to look like a twitch, large enough to matter. In the blister, the console glare stung her eyes like sand in wind. The deck moaned as Valiant angled to place its hull where someone else would have placed a shield. The timer read 00:10:28. Escalation, Holmes said softly. They're deploying scour mines. That's not blockade doctrine. That's theater. Mara understood what it meant. Scour mines scraped drive bells clean of ships and people and made both indiscriminate. She felt something hard settle in her chest, then leave in a controlled exhale. Public channel, she said. You are on, Cadenza said. Prefect Rill, Mara said, calm as counting. Your doctrine claims to protect order. You are planting ordnance that erases the difference between ship and hospital in the dark. That is not order. That is fear in formal wear. Your moral tone is still noted, Rill said. And then, as if granting her a fragment of respect for knowing how to name his teeth, he added, You have 10 minutes. We do not close our eyes when the count reaches 10. The convoy's lead ships hit the lip of the gate's throat and slid in like coins into a well that closes around wishes. The nearest Ultimacy pickets hesitated because the mirror lattice fed them a catalog of risks where their rulebook offered none. Cadenza, Mara said, You promised me teeth. Array Tooth 7 is overcompensating, Cadenza said. It is vain. Targeting Palisade 9 with a reflected error. A thin squeal traveled through the cabin as 2 beams, one theirs and one their own, turned back, met at an angle that should have been impossible. The Palisade hiccuped. The side channel bloomed. Now, Mara said. A hospital freighter named Mercy's Trail, paint still wet from towns, that had needed it yesterday, sprinted through the side channel with a thrust signature that taught the air around its drives what devotion smelled like: scorched lubricant, hot polymer, and the faint sweetness of coolant sighing into steam at the limits. The crew inside did not cheer. They breathed like people who would do it again. The road opens when someone refuses to close the door. A plan-changing escalation arrived as a quiet ping. Admiral Duong said they've begun broadcasting our convoy manifest to the system public. They're labeling the cryopods as latent combatants. Mara's jaw ached. They are trying to make their cost look like ours, she said. We reply with numbers. Cadenza spoke on a public beam, with the dignity of someone who knows what truth feels like under fingers. Concord, Ultimacy. Public channel, your prefect's classification is false, it said. Here are names, ages, medical codes. Here is the weight of a human infant in kilograms beside the weight of a mine. Balance them where you can. Cadenza Mara said you chose a hard tone. I chose a clear one, the AI replied. In the old manuals, there is a marginal note: this fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The balance sheet will not absolve a knife. Another escalation arrived like heat lightning. Array is spooling a full sector sweep, Holmes said. They will scissor the corridor to the gate's opposite lip. They want to trap the last third of the convoy and force a surrender gesture. Then we turn the gesture, Mara said. Ren frowned. How? Mara's eyes moved like a navigator, aligning stars in a place where stars refused to be helpful. They crave visible choices, she said. We give them one that cuts them. The blister hummed. Sweat tickled her ribs beneath the suit. Kemi, I need a decoy manifest that looks like every surrender protocol they love, and I need it to feel smug. Cadenza map every anchor point of the array's scissor pattern. Ren, alert all ships when I say brace you, brace. Ren swallowed. Aye. The hand that offers a collar will find its own wrists caught. Cadenza whispered across light. Map complete. Deploy the smug lie, Mara said. Duong sent the decoy. It fluttered out like a white flag, and then showed its proper color, which was not white. The Ultimacy's targeting logic bit like a hound that knows one trick too well. The scissor pattern began to form. Brace, Mara said. Now. Every ship in her fleet rolled to present radiators at a different angle. The mirror lattice shifted with an elegance that looked accidental. The scissor beams met and made a seam. For a breathless instant, the array cut its own wake, and the reflected error leaped. 2 blockade frigates shut down their drives in reflex because their doctrine had no other instruction in that column. Convoy is 80% through home, said voice cowled in disbelief and relief. Rafferty made it, Mara said. Ren scanned. We lost 13 decoys, 6 reflectors, 2 drone tenders. Mercy's trail took a skin graze. 1 radiator panel on Valiant is blistered. We'll need to trim it. Lives. Holmes' hands held still. No reported deaths. Minor burns. A broken wrist. A concussion. Mara let breath out slow enough to feel its heat. We can live with the bill, she said. The anchor holds best when everyone has a hand on the rope. Rill returned the skin around his eyes, faintly drawn. Clever, he said, but insufficient. Remain, and you will be cut. Flee, and I will count you as cowards. Count as you like, Mara said. We are not beads on your string. Admiral, he said, you have 7 minutes. She closed the channel with a soft touch. The hull shuddered as starboard radiators pulsed and the smell of singed ceramic leaked into the air. Somewhere below, a medtech laughed at a joke that wasn't funny, because being brave and being unconvincing often shake hands. Mystery Wren said, eyes on a sub-pane. Prefect Rill's flagship isn't painting not like the others. It's participating in the array with a fractional delay, like he's adding a human moment into an automatic system. Why, Mara said, and the word tasted like a seed you hold on your tongue. Conjecture, Cadenza said. He may be trying to demonstrate the necessity of removing such delays by making us hurt each other while he hesitates. Make a note, she said. We will show his delay to the whole system when we can. The quiet error in a cruel system is its confession. The last of the convoy's carriers entered the gate, including the tug with the cryopods, which signaled thanks in a code children had invented, 3 quick pips, 2 slow, and a held tone. Mara felt something unclasp behind her ribs. The blockade still held the rim like a hand on a throat, but it could not claim a kill without showing its teeth to a crowd that now knew their shape. Admiral Holmes said the Ultimacy is consolidating. They are trading reach for grip. They want us, not the convoy. Good, Mara said. We need their attention. Ren's eyebrows lifted. We do, she said, because the second act is public. Heat crept along the blister's frame and made the glass's seals shed a faint plastic tang. The timer read 000549. The numbers were no longer about civilians. They were about precedent and the cost of knives. Set the bait, Mara said. Duong glanced up. Which bait? The one where we appear to accept an open corridor, Mara said. We ask for parole lanes. We behave like a fleet that trusts a doctrine that cannot be trusted. They will open a channel with parameters that make them pretty in their own mirrors. Then we flip the corridor, Ren said, understanding like a low sunrise. Killbox turned inside out. She nodded. Cadenza, is there a corridor architecture they prefer, one that photographs well? They favor a paraboloid lane with a ceremonial curvature, Cadenza said. It is mathematically pleasing and tactically fragile. We'll request it, Mara said. We will thank them for their reasonableness. Sweet words are useful when you need an enemy to smile. Before the second set piece, the lower hangar smelled like hydraulic oil and old coffee. A deckhand in a grease-streaked jumper stripped a bolt and closed his eyes, then set the wrench down gentle as you lay down a sleeping child. A junior officer, hands shaking, wrote a letter he would never send because he knew that if he had time later, he would not want the him of now to have spoken for him. A medic taped a photograph of a dog above a triage station and said to the dog, "Wait, because it helped." On a shuttle, a pilot whispered to her co-pilot, "If we get the call, we stay low," and the co-pilot said, "Always," and both of them believed the lie exactly as much as they needed to climb into their seats. A cook slid a tray of bread into an oven whose thermostat complained in a language of uneven heat, and the smell filled a corridor like memory. The chaplain sat on a crate and untied and retied his boots until the laces remembered a knot that wouldn't slip. Above them all, the ship hummed as if it were thinking. Mara opened a public channel. "Prefect Rill," she said, dry, as numbers warm as air under a storm shield. "The civilians have passed. We propose this open a parole corridor for our withdrawal. We will power down weapons to half standby and present logs for inspection at the system edge. You keep your doctrine's honor, we keep our people. There will be witnesses." Rill did not reply immediately, and in that moment, Mara believed she could hear his breath through the insulation of politics. "Admiral Cade," he said at last, "your tone has improved. I am not without mercy. I will open a corridor. You will adhere to its grace. Send your geometry." A corridor blueprint bloomed pretty as a ribbon. Duong whistled despite herself. He really does pose for history. Holm traced the lane with 2 fingers. If we accept the curvature as drawn and proceed at his declared speed, any deviation exposes us to a crossfire he can later claim was our doing. "Not if the public sees the currents he's hiding," Ren said. Cadenza Mara said, "I want the constellation of witnesses. Put the system's eyes where his reflection is most vain. Flood the local grid with simple math. If he fires, everyone sees that his arc was a blade. I have seeded 408 observer drones disguised as navigation buoys," Cadenza said. A child could parse the recording. "Good," Mara said. "Because I want children to understand this when they ask why war made grown people behave. The lattice of eyes will make the lie look back at itself." The Valiant shifted to the corridor's lip. The deck trembled. The coolant hissed through a scarred line with a fussy rattle that made Duong thump the console with the back of her hand. The timer read 000312. The corridor opened as requested, the Ultimacy's ships making an elegant parting that looked like humility engraved on steel. "Weapons to half standby," Mara said, "just like we promised." Ren relayed voice exact. "Half standby. We are keeping our word." Holmes' eyes were thin. Array spools low. He wants plausible patience. "Let him want," Mara said. They entered the corridor. The Valiant's engines purred at a polite throttle, the way a runner slows to let a child catch up. The fleet followed, battered and intact, and unwilling to look like anything other than what it was. In the blister, a fan kicked in and ran noisy for 3 breaths, then steadied. The smell of fresh bread wandered up a stairwell and made the command deck feel like a kitchen that had lost track of time. Admiral Cadenza said softly, "He is about to spring it." "On my order," she said, "pull the corridor inside out." Wren stared, inside out. "We'll roll the boundary planes until their arcs meet," she said. "The witnesses will see a decorative gate fold into a trap that was always there." Holmes' hands hovered. "Our margin is thin." "So is the truth," Mara said. "And yet, the edge of a ribbon can be a knife or a path." Real's voice arrived rich with the kind of pity that doesn't bother to disguise its appetite. "Admiral, you are wise to accept civilization. Maintain your speed." "Your generosity is noted," Mara said. "It happened then, the moment where doctrine shows its preference for performance over outcome." The severance array warmed beneath the corridor's polite curvature, its teeth clicking like a man deciding he has debated enough. The first scissor beam brightened where it should not have glowed if the corridor were honest. Now, Mara whispered. Cadenza moved. The corridor planes rolled with a grace so quiet, the hull seemed to sigh with relief at doing something clever. The mirrored facets that had been decor became instruments. The severance array's scissor met its counter-image. The witness buoys drank light and sang it across the grid with timestamps and angles a child could draw. Their open hand closed and found itself inside ours. On the Ultimacy net, the delay in Real's flagship showed like a blush, a half-second, where a human's caution stepped in front of a machine's certainty. It was a decent impulse, and he had planned to erase it with an act of violence grand enough to excuse the hesitation. Instead, it became evidence. The first scissor beam carved through an area where no ship had been because Cadenza had already moved the image of the fleet half a heartbeat to the left. The beam's echo fell back across the Ultimacy's own interdiction wedge and shaved the fins off a cruiser's radiators. "Public tally is climbing," Cadenza said. 400,000 witnesses, 600,000, 1,000,000. "Keep counting," Mara said. Wren nodded at the heat numbers. "We can hold for 2 minutes before we start cooking our teeth," Hold Mara said. "We brace until the steady choice becomes obvious." A concussion thumped somewhere deep. The deck hummed more sharply. "We've lost pressure pump 3 on the auxiliary loop," Holmes said. "Maintenance can reroute, but the room is hot." "Give them the corridor," Mara said. "We'll buy them a minute." Duong bit her lip. Real is trying to spin the witness grid. He's claiming sabotage. Cadenza's voice gained a metal edge. "Counterspin show his delay. Show that his hand feeds the array and that our planes rolled before he fired. Show math that favors children." "Favor children," Mara said. "Always." Out in the corridor, 3 Ultimacy corvettes shifted formation without orders, because their captains were old enough to know when a bridge burned under their feet. Real's voice came back clipped. "Admiral Cade, you are exploiting ceremonial lanes." "They're only ceremonial, if you're honest," Mara said. A sensor officer barked. "Incoming not-array missile bloom. They're abandoning the pretty lane." "Point defense," Wren said. "Half standby," Holm reminded. "Public," Mara said. "Record," recording Cadenza murmured. "The more they open their hands, the more we see what they hold." The missiles came in a ribbon curving within the corridor's frame to pretend obedience. Valiant's PD mounts tapped them like impatient fingers on a table. The smell of hot capacitors layered with the odor of bread until the command blister felt like a kitchen in a factory. One missile clipped a reflector panel and spun out harmless only because nobody blinked. "Cost," she said. "Duong has a burn on her forearm," Wren replied instantly. "Mercy's trail reports 2 crew with heat rash. Pump 3 is gone. We've stabilized with 2 and 5. "Write it down," Mara said to nobody in particular. "It matters later. The quiet account of wounds is how we refuse forgetting." Then the trap inside the trap revealed itself, and it was not Ril's. A faint signal bled out of the gate's throat, civilian terrified, coded like a mayday wrapped in dust. Admiral Cadenza said there's a ship in the gate's margin that failed its transit burn. They're stuck in the throat. If the array fires full, the shock will tear them. Mara didn't look at the timer. She felt it count down against her ribs. How many souls? 43, Cadenza said. Mostly crew. One infant. The air in their forward tank tastes like copper. Ren's face went gray. If we don't divert, Mara said. We widen. Holm blinked. How? We turn the corridor wide and we hold it, Mara said. We both teach and survive. Admiral Duong said softly, that's heat we don't have. We'll find it, Mara said. The wider the way, the harder it is to call it weakness. Public grid, Mara said. Announce that we are holding the lane open for a stranded civilian ship. Invite the Ultimacy to assist. Done, Cadenza said. Real's silence was a verdict. The severance array brightened to a harsh, pearly glare. The witness count ticked. The scent of scorched polymer crawled along the floor as the Valiant's radiators bled heat into a world that did not admire generosity. Coolant hissed. Somewhere a valve chattered like teeth. Brace, Mara said again, low to her own bones. Ren touched the rail next to her hand, not quite a squeeze. With you, the corridor rolled. The planes widened. The witnesses saw a ribbon become a road, and the Ultimacy's doctrine failed to name the move because there was no place in its book for someone refusing a smaller victory for a larger mercy. The stranded ship's drive coughed, caught, and then held. But Valiant's heat curve hopped past, safe into the country, called hurt. Margin, Holm said. 9%. 8, Ren said. 7. The steady light is sometimes the glow of something burning right. Real spoke through teeth. Admiral, withdraw. I will classify this as a misunderstanding and let you go. You have made a public thing private, Mara said. We'll make it public again. Your righteousness is a luxury, Real said. It's a discipline, she said. The stranded ship slipped clear. Cadenza marked its vector with a small dot that felt like a heartbeat going where it belonged. The corridor could close now if they let it, and the witnesses would go on telling the story even if they did not. Mara opened her mouth to order the planes folded, and the fleet slid free. The array flash-bloomed. Their doctrine cannot endure an example left alive. White bit the edge of the corridor, not where it would kill, but where it would scar. The reflected light rolled back across the blockade's own watchers in a soft slap that made them flinch. The hull shook like a hand held too long in cold water, then steadied. The bread smell lingered like a promise slow to keep. Mystery resolved, Cadenza said in a tone that made numbers a knife. Ryle's delay is not conscience. It's theater he was prepared to end with a flourish. He intended us to prove him necessary. We did not. Put that in the ledger, Mara said quietly. Written. The story they wanted to write has new accountants now. The timer read 00112. Admiral Holmes said, if we hold one more minute of corridor to make the point, we risk radiator damage that will ground us for days. If we leave now, Ren said, we let him claim our exit as compliance. Mara listened to the ship breathe. She listened to the soft tick of metal calming, as if it wished to be a body. She listened to a far-off clatter that meant the cooks were moving trays, which meant there would still be dinner even if nobody tasted it. We hold, she said. 1 minute. Duong's laugh was quick and broke in the middle. Of course we do. We steady until the clock shows who we are. Heat built. Numbers climbed. Sweat crawled down spines and burned in cuts crew hadn't noticed. Pump 5 whined like a dog dreaming. The witness count surged, then stabilized at a number Cadenza read aloud, like a prayer because it was an odd human number that did not fit neat into doctrine. The blockade shifted restlessly. 40 seconds, Ren said. 30, 20, 10. Mara closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, the corridor was still a road, and the fleet was still itself. Close, she said. Cadenza rolled the planes. The ribbon became a line. The line became light without edges. The Ultimacy's ships faded into their own reflection as the fleet slipped the snare and moved to the safer dark where ships are just heat and intention. The door closes quiet when the room has been taught. They were not out. The system-scale trap flip still waited like a coin under a cup. It would be the thing that made the doctrine see itself. But the convoy lived, the witnesses carried numbers like seeds, and the fleet had learned the taste of heat that insists. Mara turned from the blister's transparency and felt the deck under her shift as if it had opinions. "Cost," she said again. "Radiator panel C is blistered," Holmes said. "We'll have to cut away the worst 5 meters. Pump 3 is slag. I've got 10 cases of heat rash, 4 minor burns, 1 concussion sleeping off a helmet kiss. The Rafferty's tug captain sprained her wrist. Mercy's trail lost a pallet that was already empty." Rand set a hand on the rail. "We can make the next play." "We will," Mara said. "The teaching continues when the first lesson lands." Cadenza spoke like a friend sitting down. "Admiral, there's an opening. The Ultimacy's corridor habit is more than theater. It's architecture. If we can pull the system's traffic norms into our witness grid, we can turn their habit into a proof. The trap flip you wanted inside-out killbox, they will either eat it or close their doctrine with their own signatures." "What do we need?" 3 hours to seed the local lanes with conformal beacons," Cadenza said, "and 6 more to make them feel like they were always there." "We don't have 9 hours, Ren said. "We have what we take," Mara said. "We'll give the system something it wants: predictability, while we teach that we prepare the flip." A quiet settled around them thick as cloth. It carried the smell of coolant and bread, and people who had not slept enough but would not say it. It carried the bite of ozone from PD capacitors and the scrape of a ladle in a pot. Sensory anchors clicked into place as if they were rivets. "The prefect will adapt," Cadenza said. "So will we," Mara said. "The mirror isn't mercy. It's a tool to make mercy visible." Holm rubbed at her temple. "Admiral, there's one more anomaly. Real's flagship is drawing power into a secondary grid that doesn't show in their doctrine diagrams. It's not the array. It's something like a mass latency archive, a ledger of ultimatums." "Of course he keeps a book," Mara said. "Open it." "Encryption is a sermon," Duong said. "But sermons repeat. I can sing back the chorus." "Do that," Mara said. "And when we flip the corridor, we will turn his book toward the people he claims to protect." Ren inhaled through his nose, steady. Set piece 2 becomes a stage. He watches us make the inside-out gate and cannot stop it without owning the cost. "Precisely," Mara said. "And after we write a policy that makes what he did today expensive for anyone who tries it again." The fleet moved into shadow that was only mathematics, and the glow along the radiator's wounded edge dimmed until it looked like breath sleeping. Coolant sighed. Fans spun down a fraction. In the hangar, the deckhand with the stripped bolt found a better wrench, and the chaplain's boots finally stayed tied. "The next lesson will arrive on time and under witness. We will teach in the open where their punishments hide." The fleet coasted on soft burn while the wounded radiator cooled with the sound of a kettle trying not to boil. Cadenza pushed conformal beacons into normal traffic like seeds stitched under a hem, each one tuned to a humble frequency pilot associations had used for years. The air in the blister tasted faintly of antiseptic now, a nurse's cart having ridden the lift past an open vent, and the ghost of bread persisted, as if the ship insisted on reminding everyone why heat belonged to kitchens first. Ren stood at the rail with her eyes on the new constellations the beacons made, and the deck thrummed as pumps 3 and 5 argued about responsibility. "Local pilots are echoing the beacons," Cadenza said. "They think we're making lanes safer." "We are," Mara said. "The beauty is not even a lie. Ultimacy traffic control nodes have accepted the calibration pings." Duong added her sleeve taped over a reddened forearm. "Real either does not care or likes the look." "The trap needs an audience," Mara said. "We will oblige. The mirror will not flatter. It will return their shape." Before the next set piece, Leto's Crown Station glided in its slow roll, and a market ring hummed like a hive too tired to sting. A machinist fed her toddler soft fruit while haggling for radiator paste blinking at the way, civilian buoys blinked in a new and reassuring cadence. A dock manager lifted his mug, sniffed recycled steam, and said to nobody, "Huh," because the lanes looked cleaner than any posted notice had made them in years. A courier with a broken thumbnail switched to the new channel and felt her shoulders drop as traffic spread like dough rolled evenly. Two teens leaned over a guardrail and counted ships daring each other to guess which bore refugees and which carried ore, then stopped daring when a hospital freighter sent a courteous ping. In a tea stall, a woman in a grease-streaked apron wiped her hands and watched the witness grid like it was weather, then reached up to touch a cracked picture of her mother. Somewhere deeper in the ring, a man who had never liked soldiers found himself hoping strangers would get home. "Beacons seated to 70% saturation," Cadenza said. "Given this curve, we can hit 90 in 1 hour." "We won't get an hour," Wren murmured. "We won't need it," Mara replied. "Home status on that secondary draw we saw in Reel's ship." "Still warming," Holmes said. "If it's an archive, it's about to wake. The ledger waits for signatures. They didn't mean to leave." Reel arrived like a stamp pressed onto wet clay, his face slightly softer now, as if the pressure hurt to maintain. "Admiral Cade," he said, "your beacons are appreciated. We too prefer order." "Then you should retire the knife," Mara said. "We prefer options," he replied. "Here is one: depart the system under grace. I will refrain from pursuit." "You want us gone before the book opens," Duong murmured. Mara tilted her head. "We will depart when the people here can see what you have been writing." He blinked as if she had spoken in a dialect meant for children, then ended the feed. "We will count what they call inevitable and name it a choice." Heat shimmered at the edge of the blister's transparency, refracted from the wounded radiator like breath on old glass. Cadenza spread a model across their panes. The beacons made a soft ovoid lane through traffic, a socially sanctioned shape, the kind that calmed skippers and made insurers smile. When he moves the severance array to bracket this oval, the AI said, "We roll it inside out." Their interlocks will see fratricide risk and freeze. Their doctrine will meet its insurance policy. Wren nodded. "It's mean in a decent way." "It's exact," Mara said. "Hold steady while the quiet work does its work." Duong's fingers danced, then paused, then danced again. "I have a chorus," she said. The archive encryption repeats on the half-beat like a hymn. It's a list of ultimatums by sector and year. It's got a second-layer commentary. Holm frowned. "Annotations about delays," Duong said. "Moments when a human paused. Reel collects them like sins." Cadenza, Mara said in jest, "and prepare excerpts suited for 10-year-olds and mayors." "Done," Cadenza said. "I will make the numbers soft enough to hold and sharp enough to cut." The deck trembled as the shuttle launched with a throaty cough from the forward bay. Ozone stung the inside of Mara's nose, and she swallowed against the snap of cold air bleeding from a stubborn vent. "Wren," she said, "time to witness saturation." 2.9 million, Wren said. "Climbing. Anchor the lane with small, honest lights." Reel's broadcast took a new tone, the voice of an officiant about to ban joy. "Citizens," he said, "heard across storefronts and in cargo hatches, the ultimacy announces the rational interval. Human oversight of severance procedures will be suspended for one operational cycle to demonstrate the efficiency you deserve. Delay is decadence. Mercy is perverse when it prolongs pain." "Clip that," Mara said. "Clipped," Cadenza replied. "What's his secondary grid doing?" Holm asked. "Feeding the suspension," Duong said. "He's making the delay illegal to prove how right it is to delete it." Mara's mouth went dry. "Then we show the cost of a world without a hand on the brake. We learned their delay, and we will use it." The fleet slid toward the announced oval, and the witnesses watched the way people watch a tightrope. The beacons blinked a lullaby rhythm. The console glare brightened, scattering reflections off Mara's cheekbones like frost. "Weapons status," she said. "Half standby for the record," Wren replied. "Actual threaded for point defense and strut trim only." "We don't break ships," Mara said. "We trim pride." "I will aim for couplers and cooling collars," Holmes said. The array is unchaperoned, Cadenza added with a calm that would terrify a worse person. It is hungry without anyone to tell it to chew slowly. Then let's make it bite its tongue, Mara said. The lattice will bend their hunger back into their own teeth. Before the flip, a freighter captain on Leto's crown stood in a quiet bay and touched the side of her ship with a flat palm, feeling the faint heartbeat of life support through metal. A child on a tram ran his fingers along a cold window and drew a circle, then another circle, then a line through both as his mother watched the same line being drawn on a public display. A station cop stood at parade rest and pretended his back didn't ache, then shifted because his back was more honest than his training. A cook broke a loaf and handed the bigger half to a customer who had not asked. Two elderly men argued whether mercy or math had brought them breakfast, then agreed it was rude to separate the two when egg steam was in their noses. In an airplant nursery, a girl with dirt under her nails whispered to the vines about ships because the vines were good listeners. On the far rim, a programmer paused her code and closed her eyes, willing strangers to be kind. Real is proud of his ceremonial oval, Duong said. He's publishing its curvature like lace on a collar. Witness buoys show Cadenza said that firing now will spray his own pickets. He will wait for a pose. Let him pose, Mara said. Holm on my count roll the planes and tug the oval into a saddle. Ren watch the interlocks. They will twitch. The hull's hum is weird, Ren said. Pump 5 is complaining. She can complain after Mara said. The open curve is a trap until someone changes its sign. Count Mara said, fingertips light on the rail, as if she strummed a thing that wanted to sing. 3, 2, now. The corridor's surfaces turned not far, the way a hand tilts a mirror to catch the light on someone else's face. The beacons chirped that the world loved safety. The severance array, freed of delay, cut along the oval's inner edge with the eagerness of a blade on a soft fruit. Its reflection met it. Interlocks up and down the ultimacy line sniffed the numbers of friendly damage and froze certain mouths. Two corvettes went half silent as their weapons logic became shy. Public tally is spiking, Cadenza said. Videos are everywhere. A grandmother has captioned one with an excellent joke. Rill's voice cracked like new paint in cold. Admiral Cade, cease your interference. We're polishing your corridor, she said. Their own rules are pins we can move with 2 fingers. Heat soaked the blister's frame until an old gasket let out the sweet, bitter smell of warmed rubber. The Valiant's hull vibrated like a throat clearing. On Holmes' pane, red slices slid harmlessly where they had meant to carve. Ren's lips shaped numbers without sound, then he found them. Interlock trip at 12 degrees, he said. Trip at 19. He's losing the kill box. Duong Mara said show his archive annotations where witnesses can see them. Highlight any place he praised, deleting a pause. Dun Duong said, voice low, with a species of glee that is not cruelty, but remembers why we have laws. Prefect Cadenza said on a polite public channel, your rational interval has increased the risk to your own ships by 31%. Here are your notes. Here are the names of captains affected. Here is the time a child will need to read this and understand it. If you broadcast internal doctrine, Real said almost gentle, you will make this place harder to govern, Admiral. Then govern in a way that does not require secrets to survive, Mara said. The account is read aloud so the room can correct the math. Escalation arrived wearing ceremony as a mask. Real's flagship extended panels like wings and lit its secondary grid until the air around it brightened with static. He's going to ram the witness grid, Duong said. Not physically. He wants to flood the spectrum with a choir only his script can sing. Counterchoir, Ren asked. I can hum a simpler song, Cadenza said. It has fewer words and better timing. Do it, Mara said. Holm prepare strut trim on his array's outer ring. If he lunges, we clip his nails. Real breathed once into the silence of his own net, then said, citizens forgive necessity, which is what men say when they ask steel to replace courage. The severance array flexed for a full sector sweep that would ignore ceremony and cut through traffic lanes under a banner named Reason. Witness count, Mara asked. 4.8 million, Cadenza said. And a child has drawn the lanes on a wall. Good, Mara said. We brace while we show them a way to stand without us. The sweep began and met the saddle fold. The reflected geometry turned his broad gesture into a lunge at his own feet. Interlocks tripped in a cascade, a polite spasm that froze half the array. The other half tried to continue and nearly sheared a picket's radiator stack. Holm trimmed a coupler with a surgical pulse. The beam walked wide and cooled to sulk. The hull thudded as a support spar somewhere aft decided to remember it was mortal. Kostren said automatically. Support spar J7, delaminated, Holm said. We'll be limping. Medbay reports 2 wrench drops and 1 badly bruised shin. Write it down, Mara said, jaw tight. We are not saints. We are accountable. The steady line is made of small pains no one sees but us. Before the third escalation, the station's tea stall had stopped taking money for 60 heartbeats. The owner waved hands and poured cups and muttered about how every ledger has days you don't balance in coin. A mechanic pushed a stranger behind a crate when a shuttle roared too close to the ring, then apologized for touching his back so hard. On a refugee deck, a boy pressed his ear to a wall and said, I can hear them being brave, and his sister said, shh, but didn't tell him he was wrong. A traffic controller took her glasses off and wiped them, then put them back on, because touching something she could fix gave her permission to watch what she could not. A janitor set a bucket aside and kept the walkway dry so nobody slipped while they stared at the screens. A med student recited the names of nerves to keep from crying. The station's plants, oblivious, made oxygen like they always did, and the quiet green insisted that somebody should live long enough to breathe it. Real is reaching, Duong said. He's slaving auxiliary cutters to the archive bus. He's going to make his book a weapon. Then make the book a mirror, Mara said. I can route the archive's index to our beacons, Cadenza said. Every time he tries to erase a pause, the index will flash the time and place of other pauses he erased. The system will see a constellation of mercy deleted. Do it, Mara said. Wren readiness on strut trim 2, Green Wren said. We trim the first ring. He'll feel the second. Their own narrative becomes glass when we turn it toward light. Rill's broadcast dropped ceremony like a robe. Admiral Cade. Enough. Enough, Mara agreed, is a very useful measure. Here are yours. The archive index lit up every beacon in the oval, tiny, honest lights, blinking the when and where of people who had once paused and been punished for it. Traffic slowed voluntarily. An Ultimacy corvette backed 2 ship lengths to avoid crossing a posted memory. The array's frame creaked audibly through the net, as if the thing itself hated the press of purpose without pause. Holmara said trim. A whisper of force kissed a retaining ring. The array shuddered into safeties that had not been exercised in years because no one had wished to admit they existed. Real's face appeared eyes suddenly human with something like fear or rage, but shaded by habit until it looked like nothing. Prefect Mara said softly enough that only 1 million people could hear stop. He did not. He tried again to force the sweep. The witnesses saw this number of captains who powered down rather than slice neighbors. They saw the pause he was punishing grow into a local weather. Cadenza set the frames and beacons to account with timestamps so simple the teens on the guardrail could nod at them without asking anyone's permission. The public tally will outlive our names, and that is good. Admiral Holmes said heat is climbing into ugly. Panel C won't heal if we push. We are at the part where it costs something, Mara said. We will pay for clarity. Ren's voice was gentle. Kemi, your arm. Duong flexed her taped wrist. One good hand is enough to embarrass a tyrant. We can rotate radiators B and D to share the load, Holmes said. We'll flicker like a sputtering candle, Flicker, Mara said. Children remember candles. The hull vibrated with a low, bone-filled hum. The scent of coolant sharpened like raw apple. A fan kicked on and rattled 2 screws in a housing until a tech whacked it, and the noise settled into a useful purr. On the far pane, Reel's flagship held still, and the static around it whined like a string pulled too tight. The anchor is lighter when everyone lifts with us. The final act of the flip began as a simple pilot advisory. Traffic notice cadenza set across public bands with the calm authority of a ferry captain. Be advised, ceremonial oval converted to safety saddle for duration of rational interval. Maintain lanes. Recordings active. Reel tried to talk over it and could not. His voice rode the same bed of math now, and the math would retain what it liked. Admiral Cade, in the name of the council. You speak for fewer people than you did 5 minutes ago, Mara said. Ultimacy Cruiser Vex. A new voice cut in, nervous, declaring weapons safed. We will not fire into a lane with children in it. Logged cadenza said, the kindness in the word doubled by the knowledge that someone would need that log later to keep their job. Ultimacy Corvette. Pruitt, another voice said, safed. Our captain is old enough to remember a different math. Reel bared teeth. You disgrace your uniforms. You disgrace your delays, Mara said. The steady choices of small captains can break a grand lie. It took another minute to finish what started. Holm trimmed the remaining ring and a coupler. The array sagged into its safeties with a sound like a crowd finally sitting down. The oval's saddle unfurled into something ordinary, and therefore divine lane discipline. The beacons blinked the names of pauses like a soft memorial that suggested shaping law rather than sharpening blades. Public reaction is crossing from watching to deciding, cadenza said. 2 counselors have posted statements condemning the rational interval. One uses the word outlaw. Put that one in bold, Duong said. We don't need bold, Mara said. We have bread. Ren glanced at her. Bread. It smells like it, Mara said. And the laugh they all shared was not a celebration, only a note to keep their hands from shaking. The mirror lattice has cooled to useful metal, not theater. Reel shut his feed. His flagship rotated slowly the way a man turns. Before admitting he is trapped by furniture, he arranged himself. He has another move, Holmes said. It's the sort that doesn't go on doctrine cards. Ramming Ren asked, dry enough to take the glamour out of the thought. Not with witnesses, Mara said. He will try to pivot this into necessity. He will threaten to resign in protest unless the council makes delay deletion permanent. Then we make the council's choice easy, cadenza said. I will compile the witness grid into a packet anyone can parse. We will add a note at the end. If you keep severance without pause, you accept this casualty curve. And we add, Mara said, that we will not comply in our waters, and neither will pilots, evidently. The deck shivered as radiators rotated. A valve clacked open and steam ghosted along a vent seam and smelled like pennies. A crewman on a lower deck swore tenderly when hot water splashed his boot, as if the ship had stepped on his foot in a dance. The open secret is safety that looks like mutiny to tyrants. After the flip costs came due, crew slumped against bulkheads and let their heartbeat take the measure of the drills they had not run but had somehow passed. Medbay's disinfectant chewed at throats while a nurse taped a knuckle and told a patient to lie convincingly for an hour. Valiant's Radiator C bore a patchwork of makeshift shields that looked like quilting done by impatient aunts with burn-scarred hands. A tug pilot sent the bridge a picture of a sandwich held up in triumph as if bread were a medal. Mercy's Trail messaged that their ovens were still hot and invited anyone to drop by for dinner if schedules aligned with kindness. A junior officer threw up from the letdown and then apologized to the bucket and then to the floor. Someone somewhere slept with boots on because dreams would not wait long enough to permit courtesy. Admiral Cadenza said the council is convening now. Their public thread has a phrase repeated thrice: interim suspension of severance without human oversight. Interim Ren said, they will want precedent. They will get it, Mara replied. Cadenza draft the post-event memo established that under open record, severance arrays must include a human delay with accountability trails. Any suspension is unlawful. I will include signatures from Ultimacy captains who safed, Cadenza said. Add the line Mara said that after today, deletion of delay is an assault that will be met with public lanes and trim. The ledger closes on this page with room for policy. She breathed in the cockpit's cool, the taste of ion and oil and ship soap. Then she looked at Ren. He's not done. No, Ren agreed. He is a man who loves a flourish. Let him write it in a small corner, Mara said. Real emerged with a new proposition that smelled like smoke under perfume. Admiral Cade, he said, tone smoothing into statesman for the peace of civilians withdraw beyond orbit while we investigate your allegations. Refusal will be seen as opportunism. You do not have to investigate, Mara said. You have to read. Our institutions require process. So do ovens, Mara said. And yet bread appears. He blinked, then gave her a small smile that might have been respect grown in rocky soil. You are persuasive. The numbers are, she said. The count is honest because it was kept under witness. He pulled his flagship back one ship length, then another. A quoted regulation scrolled on public feeds like a ribbon no one wanted, and a simple recording of beacons blinking outlasted it. On Leto's crown, the tea stall finally took coin again, and the owner wrote an extra line in a notebook, 2 cups gifted to history. In the refugee deck, a child slept without clenching his jaw. Admiral Holmes said we can leave. No one can say we fleeced the moment. Not yet, Mara said. We promised one more lesson. The systemic part, Ren said, quiet. The rule. She nodded. Cadenza, send the memo. Use the title they can eat without choking. Pause clause, Cadenza said, pleased with itself. I will make it short enough to memorize. And we sign with the names of captains who refuse to fire, Mara said. We teach with numbers, yes, but we also teach with signatures. The rule is simple enough to carry in a pocket. The fleet turned on low burn, sliding to the edge of the system, like a dancer leaving a floor without breaking eye contact with the partner she had just corrected. The radiator hiss softened. The console glare eased into something like dawn through dirty glass. Duong leaned back and closed her eyes for 4 seconds, which was as much luxury as pain allowed. Admiral Cadenza said the Council has voted. Severance arrays without human oversight are suspended under sanction. Future use requires public audit trails. They have borrowed my phrase. Which one, Ren asked. A child can parse it, Cadenza said. Mara let her shoulders unhook. Addendum, she said. Post our after-action heat casualties panel damaged the tug captain's sprain. We do not hide our cost. The packet is up, Cadenza said, and someone on the station has drawn your ship as a loaf with wings. Frame it, Mara said. The cooling metal sings a little when a law turns. Real came one last time, not to threaten, but to ask a question in the manner of a man who has lost a chess game and wants to understand which move was the one he loved too much. Admiral Cade, he said. What if the delay costs lives? It does, Mara said. It also saves a world from thinking knives make bread. He nodded like someone tasting a new kind of salt. I will write my report. Write it true, she said. Include the bread. You are infuriating. I am patient, she said. The steady hand is not kinder because it shakes less. It shakes longer. The Valiant turned her nose to the gate's safer dark. Fans sighed. A loose spoon in the mess clinked against a tin as if making a toast in a poor house. Medbay's monitors ticked soft greenness over sleeping crew. Duong flexed her taped arm and hissed through teeth as the skin tugged. Holm wrote the word delaminated twice and underlined it because words sometimes need to be watched after they are said. Ren leaned his head back and listened to the hull as if the ship's breath might tell him what his own was doing. Cadenza Mara said, send a quiet note to the tug Rafferty. Ask after the cryopods. 2 stabilized today, 3 tomorrow, Cadenza said. The infant is sleeping. The mother has stopped apologizing for how long the child takes to breathe. Good, Mara said. We learn by number only so we can remember by name. The last act for people like them is never drama. It is paperwork and maintenance and teaching a sign how to sign for a wrench, like it is a promise. A petty officer replaced screws in the rattling fan cowling and wrote the size down because the next hand might be smaller. The chaplain checked on a cook's back and decided that a story needed telling. Beside the ovens, a story about pauses and heat and why law rides along. The ship's baker scraped a pan and swore fondly at a stubborn crust, then smiled, because stubbornness had just kept half a sector from bleeding for someone's doctrine. In the blister, the glass cleared as the radiator's heat cooled to a humane dullness. Admiral Cadenza said very softly, as if it stood in a chapel, the grid has started using a phrase for today, the day the lane refused a knife. They can name it what they need, Mara said. We'll do the next thing. What is the next thing? Ren asked, eyes half closed, voice not tired so much as spent. We make sure nobody can quietly make the rational interval permanent, she said. We keep the pause clause in mouths until it tastes like inspector lips. And if they forget, then we return, she said. We have bread to deliver. The anchor stays in the locker, but the rope is run. Silence settled, the kind that is not absence but room for heartbeats. The hull thrummed as if to approve the reduction in noise. The radiator panel ticked like a cooling roof after rain. Out the blister blockade lights dimmed by a measurable fraction as the ultimacy powered down a pride that had learned how expensive it is to be adored by its own reflection. On every feed that mattered for a day, a public tally confirmed what people had already decided at tables and rails: delay is human, and human is law. Mara looked at the ship that was under her bones, and at the people who had carried it through a physics lesson aimed at politics. She let herself think briefly of how it would feel to sleep a full night, while fans purr even, and alarms respect dreams. Then she spoke not to the grid, not to Rill, not to history, but to her crew, knowing history would discover the words anyway, as it always did with things spoken in kitchens. We are not brave because we rush first. We are brave because we are last to close our hands. We do not win by cutting deeper. We win by holding a shape long enough that someone else can step into it without bleeding. We will count, and we will sign, and we will put down the knife when bread is ready. If we must pick it up again, it will be for trimming, not carving hearts. We taught today so that there will be fewer lessons tomorrow. That is enough and not enough, and we will carry both. The room holds its breath, and then every hand goes back to work.